Okay, well, I think we'll kick things off as people are joining. It's great to see everyone here this evening. Welcome, another month, and got an absolutely fabulous session again for you this month. And it's great to see so many of you joining as well. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. And we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So yeah, we've got an absolutely great session tonight. I think it's going to be a really good discussion as well following Blair's presentation. So Blair, please, will be speaking to us in a minute. And the title that we came up with Blair was "We are standing on the cusp of solving climate, will we or won't we?" So it's a good, nice, big title. So the format for this evening is we're going to hear from Blair first, then we'll ask her some questions and then open it up for questions from the group. Interestingly, also, I think many of you would have come along to the session that we did with Tim Buckley last month, and he looked at similar angles to what we're going to talk about today, but he was really talking about it from a Chinese sort of China background from his recent trip there. And tonight we're going to look at it a little bit more from a US kind of perspective as well as Australia. So introducing Blair Police. Blair has a huge wealth of environment and climate experience. And this knowledge has been built up over many years and within many different organizations and roles. She's incredibly well regarded and respected. Blair is currently the Director of Philanthropy at Invest. She's the Managing Editor of Climate and Capital Media, and she's also the founder of Climate Capital Forum Australia. And in previous roles and organizations that Blair has worked for, include she was the co-founder and former CEO of 350.org Australia. She was a board member of Greenpeace Australia Pacific and independent chair of Green Building Council of Australia, amongst many other climate and environment organisations. And Blair's going to talk a little bit about her personal environment and climate journey to date. Then she's going to give us a global perspective, as I mentioned, with particular reference to the US. And then look at where Australia is positioned in regards to climate and the environment, and I think importantly, the potential we have. So welcome, Blair. Thank you so much for making the time, and over to you.
Thanks so much. And thanks all of you for turning it on a Monday night. It's amazing to me that people will do that. So thanks a lot for giving me your attention and your time. And yeah, look forward to having a discussion after about your take on where we need to go in Australia in particular, and your own sort of background experience of the challenges I guess we have in getting people excited about the potential for decarbonizing. Yeah, I guess I'll just share a screen, and I've got a couple slides just to sit around the background, but to kick off, always no fun to list data and stats, so I always just flick them on a slide behind. So hopefully you can see it. Here it comes. Here we go. And yeah, I love the idea of professionals for climate. It's such a great idea. We should have more of this by sector too. There's some sectors that are great at talking about these bigger issues and some that kind of avoid it like the plague. So it's really lovely to get together with people working in all sorts of areas and having an interest in the topic. I just threw this little slide together for a few things I've done because Stephen asked me to say a few things about how I got here. I started as an envelope stuffer in Washington, D.C. in the Greenpeace office, and then went on to run Greenpeace International's global comms office out of London, which was just, one of those dream jobs where you can't pinch in yourself believing that somebody's paying you to do this for a living. It was an amazing experience to work with just kind of the A team of creative strategists on how to get stuff done in really unusual and creative ways. Learned a ton along the way about non-conventional approaches to kind of strategy, which was really fantastic. And then strangely got recruited as head of PR for the Body Shop, working with Anita Roddick in London, in the UK, in Littlehampton, UK. And I didn't last too long there. It was an interesting place. Loved the campaigning, and the team were amazing, but it was a chaotic place. Very much a founder syndrome situation where the Anita had her way of doing things, and there was, her way or the highway. And then married an Australian, and we came to Sydney in 1998. And when I got here, I jumped back to interestingly work on with Greenpeace on the Green Olympics, which I have to say is one of the most fun things I've ever done. Really interesting because it was one of the first times I ever focused on sort of solutions and kind of strategic solutions. How can you use the kind of expense spent on the Olympic Games to showcase all kinds of environmental solutions? And there was a real appetite for it. And then after that, I went on to work at a place called the Sustainable Development Energy Development Authority, which was set up by Bob Carr after the Games, very much to take all those learnings from the Olympics and kind of set them loose. It was a great team of people, and still to this day get together with a lot of the crowd from those days, because it was a pretty exciting time to kind of be working on environmental solutions and climate a little bit, a lot eventually, but initially some of the environmental stuff. And then I worked for a lot of different orgs as a consultant and did a bunch of things, companies as well. And then I founded 350.org working with Bill McKibben. Cannot say enough about what a lovely human being he is, and I'm hoping we might bring him back again in April next year if all goes well. I won't bore you with the gory details, but he set up something called Third Act in America, which is very much about activating people over 60, technically 55, but to kind of get involved in climate in a way that suits, our age group, if you will. And we're hoping we might be able to set one up here in Australia working within an existing organization. So if so, we'll get him out again, and I hope he'll be able to do that. Just the most lovely guy, great thinker in the space, great writer, and always a joy to work with. And then various things after that, but I landed at Ethinvest, which is a financial services company, in fact, the oldest ethical investor company in Australia. But mostly I work on philanthropy with our clients, but also we have our own foundation, the Ethinvest Foundation. And the beauty of that is the freedom it gives me to work with lots of different organizations working across all kinds of issues, and see ways we can help them other than just financial. With 40 years of charity experience, I can, for free, tell them little things about governance, fundraising, and all sorts of stuff. So that keep a hand into some of that work. And Climate Capital Media is one of for me, a surprise kind of later in life, old bunch of journalists, dare I say, that had worked the old days when we had, kind of real power in what journalism could do to expose things and get people activated on issues. And so we've that group is about 8 of us, mostly out of New York and the US, but we work on the fact that really, and I'll talk a little bit later in my chat with you about the diminishing independent media that we have, and the need to kind of look for ways to refund and find ways for media to be successful, because with Murdoch owning most of Australia's media, we're in real danger, I think, of losing that ability to get true information that is separate from vested interest. So Climate Capital Media was really initially set up before the US IRA to encourage people around the world, but Americans in particular, to understand the opportunity side of acting on climate. So investors, innovators in startups and decarbonizing, people who work in ESG and related things. And I just can't tell you how exciting it is to get together with that group 2 times a week and brainstorm kind of where's it all going. And I've learned a ton just by being able to do that. And the last thing I'll talk about is about Climate Capital Forum, which after the last election, I was aware that there were still 400 fossil fuel lobbyists in Australia and in Canberra. And there was almost nobody for our side, which is the decarbonizing side, the progressive money investment side. So I made it easy through a network of various people, including Tim Buckley, to turn up in Canberra maybe 3-4 times a year and talk to politicians about what we need in order to be better at funding solutions. And since the IRA, we have more of in the US, we have more of an argument to make that we need our own version of that kind of thing. So that's kind of a little bit of my background. Hopefully that makes sense. I just thought I'd touch on kind of why climate, why hope right now. I do think it's the biggest challenge the human race has ever faced. The transformation needed to address this in the window of time that we have, we're not great at change, human beings, um, is pretty phenomenal and daunting, to say the least. But I'll give you, just in case you didn't see the news through, Carbon Brief was the first to report it, but City Morning Herald did a pretty good job too. Um, just in the last couple of months, we've watched China's economy grow, not a lot, but a little bit, but their emissions begin to peak and go down. And this is the first time out of a radical time like COVID, where continued growth and business as usual has happened, but through their efforts to decarbonize and in particular move to renewables, we're seeing leveling and dropping down of their emissions. And because they produce the vast majority of what the world uses, every kind of thing, this means that those emissions globally, this is a global impact. And it's so much sooner than people thought. Uh, in China, sooner than China thought, that there's some real hope that this is a turning point. And while of course it's not necessarily going to stay, consistently going down, the hope is that the trajectory will be down, and that it, for me anyway, gives me the sense that why stay in it and why keep fighting and why fight harder potentially than ever to get climate action happening, because we're so close potentially to turning this around. And I hope that gives you a little bit of hope, because often when you read the news, mostly what you hear is pretty negative. But this piece of information for me stopped me in my tracks. And I really thought, wow, now's our time to raise up, to get more active, to kind of double down and back in the kind of change that we know we need to have. And I hope that we'll watch it as it continues to go, but hopefully it will give us more incentive to kind of keep going globally to get stuff done. I'm not going to bore you with lots of details about why the US IRA has been so transformational, but I did just want to flash up some statistics about the size and scale, because often in Australia, when I talk about, and Tim and the forum talk about why Australia needs to kind of get really more active in the role that we can play, and that is by basically matching the kind of stuff that's happening all over the world, is watching how quickly Biden's IRA transformed the US economy from seriously going down into a potential cycle of no return, particularly around manufacturing, to honestly $3 trillion of private equity. Sorry, that's supposed to say 3, not 34. 3 trillion in private capital went in after the IRA was passed within about 18 months, into clean tech of all kinds. And while there'll be things that don't work and things that fail, the incredible speed of change that's triggered across all kinds of the supply chain of decarbonizing was quite frankly awe-inspiring. and knowing how quickly and how much China has done, and Tim talked about them owning 85% of the decarbonizing world right now, supply chain wise, I'm sure when you heard him speak. The fact that the US is able to kind of jump in the game quite late in the piece after Trump and into the Biden administration shows you what's possible by kind of grabbing that and saying we're going to do it, we're turning a corner, and how fast investment dollars and businesses responded to that. So I think that's another good news story that was slightly unexpected. I mean, I was really interested to see the US IRA get passed by one vote, but keep in mind that there's the good potential that a Kamala Harris and a next election would lock it in and make it pretty impossible to undo. So fingers crossed, but all signs look pretty positive. So what are we up against in Australia? We've lived with a dig and ship economy now for many years, 50, 60, 100 years almost, where our economy and our thinking about the economy is, we dig up minerals and supplies, we ship them off, no value adding. And I won't bore you with the details of this kind of thinking, but the forum in particular is focused on changing that to a value adding economy, and what it would take to do that. Not that much, really, because in the battle for decarbonizing around the world, the demand is growing and growing all the time, but many nations, Korea, Japan, and China in particular, need to import decarbonizing, or they won't be able to meet their net zero targets. So who do they look to? Where are they buying things like iron ore and steel and potentially rare earth minerals or batteries? Australia is a key player in that. So we have a lot to gain by changing our thinking from just digging it out and shipping it out raw materials to value adding, which helps us support our own economy and provide jobs, but help other countries do their net zero target hitting very much faster than they could do without it. So an interesting maybe fact that kind of blew me away was that if Australia doesn't offer these kinds of things through like green iron ore, potentially through renewable energy, but potentially through green hydrogen as well, Japan, Korea, and China cannot meet their net zero targets. So, and that's not any country in the world could do it. It's Australia needs to do it in order, because of the amount we supply those countries in things like iron ore and steel. So the potential is huge if we grab it. The market's almost already established for us, but we're going to need policy and leadership to get there. So what does that look like? Here are just a few ideas of things that we're doing, things that we need to be doing more of, and that kind of need to shift a very conservative investment kind of community. But I name super funds in particular because our super funds are some of the biggest amount of money in the world in potential investing. But there are many policies keeping our own super funds from investing in Australia and from investing in decarbonizing. So we need to modernize our policies, and we need to de-risk by putting some federal funds into the kind of stuff that we know is going to be, there's real market demand for it. So Future Made in Australia Act, you might have heard of that. It's our attempt at an IRA in a very much less ambitious way, but a good way, and it's solidly thought out. And a lot of what the forum in particular, and about 15 other organizations like the Investors Group on Climate Change and Responsible Investment Association, etc., have all been asking for, are these kinds of things that we could change policy-wise and or put in terms of investment. Some of them are already on their way, and some have to get approved through the act and the legislation that goes with that. And that's being debated right now. So one thing I'd love to talk to you all about after we finish this kind of initial discussion is what we as professionals can do to ring our members and say, we really need this and we want to back it, and how can we support an effort to get Future Made in Australia policies up and running in Australia. Now, let's be clear, they won't be perfect, and it's by far from being, everything we need to get going, but it sends a really strong signal, particularly to private investors, that we're moving and we're not going to go back. And in a country where we have played climate wars for the last 10, 12 years with the previous government, we're going to need to shift thinking a lot in how fast this is moving. And we're going to have to shore up that idea that investment and private money and private equity put into this is going to be a good investment and a risk worth taking. Sorry, I'm going backwards. So while it's a good initiative, and I've spent a lot of time, by the way, volunteering on for the community independence over the years, and happened to be in Wentworth, where Allegra Spender has been, and all of the community independence and independence generally have played a really important role to push for more talk about climate action. But I find still a real reluctance for Australia to take up a kind of IRA approach, and I'm slightly worried that we may criticize this to death, and certainly the opposition will try to target it and say, we can't do that. We need nuclear, or we need stupid things that are never going to work here. The moment truly is now. So when I say we're sitting at the cusp, we're already probably 3 years behind where we should be in grabbing the opportunities that are offered to us, because we have some of the cheapest and most abundant renewable energy in the world, and we have an unbelievable, enviable amount of rare earth minerals, and an incredibly kind of professional mining sector that can mine those rare earth minerals in a way that is not utterly destructive. So if you look at comparing us to the Democratic Republic of Congo, we already have infrastructure to do mining for rare earth minerals very, very well. So that's the role that we can play, but only if we kind of get our act together to do it well. So what would that look like? We definitely need more investment, and we need ambition and speed. We'd suggested a coordinator general to try and pull together the huge number of kind of policies that the government has either doing or wants to do, so that someone is looking at the big picture. In America, they have these kind of czar roles, and I just think Australia kind of needs someone at the top to kind of communicate it and also be the person that answers questions and is looking at that kind of bigger picture outside of sort of the siloed impact of some of the specific areas. I'd say our biggest challenge at the moment is the Albo government's inability to communicate the vision to Australians. I don't know why that is. I've tried multiple times to offer help and bring in others who can help them communicate it. I was hoping when Catherine Murphy made the jump from the Guardian into the Prime Minister's office that she might be able to provide help in kind of taking the monkey off their back of don't put your head up. We really need to know the vision. And I'm all for tell us what that looks like and do it on multiple levels so that Australians at every position, whether you're a professional or you're working class or you're regional or you're rural or you need to understand what's in this for you, and that just isn't being done very well by the current government. More detail than you need, but there's in the Future Made in Australia Act a thing called a production tax credit. For some reason, and this would encourage manufacturing of some specific kinds of things that could work really well here, but you wouldn't get the credit until it was up and running and successful. So it's a little bit of a no risk kind of tax benefit. For some reason, they put it in for 2027. I don't know what we're waiting for. I'd really like that to happen by 2025. First Nations clean energy strategy was promised, but didn't come out in Future Made in Australia. So one of the challenges is including First Nations people in this so that they understand their role and potential advantages of being part of all this. I don't know why dragging their feet on this, but we need to get it out quickly. Many of you might be aware of Saul Griffith's work on moving to electrification. We need more of that. We need incentives and loans and financial mechanisms that can really help that along. We've been a bit lax in supporting that at any kind of real level so that the public can see the benefit of that. And there's 32.6 million for carbon capture and storage, complete waste of cash. If you want to make economic go at CCS, go for it. We shouldn't be funding it. It's failed for the last 15, 20 years. We have put more money down that drain than I care to tell you how much it is. That's not something that's innovative or helpful. I would take that money out and I'd stick it straight into other things like electrification. These are things we as professionals can talk to our members about. Let's get going, but let's do it well. Let's make sure it's transparent, that people understand what the benefits are, and that we're really communicating to people what we're going to get out of this change. So where to next for Australia? The Future Made in Australia Act is, I think, our first big step. If we can get that over the line, I think it's like our previous battle for a carbon price that went on and back and forth. And we need to set it and go with it. We need, of course, it won't be perfect, and there'll be mistakes made. But once we get things going, it'll start to work itself out. And one thing I'd say is people say, but government's terrible at this stuff. Actually, we're not terrible in Australia at all. If you look at the Clean Energy Finance Corporation and the success that it's had, as well as the success of ARENA and various other programs, we've got some that have been really doing great things. Vast majority of people don't know they exist or what they're doing. But last time I heard, the Clean Energy Finance Corp, for every dollar of federal money that's put in to invest in renewables, we get something like $4 to $5 back into the coffers of Australia. So it's not like we don't know how to do it. We just have to ramp it up to a higher level with some confidence, realizing that we're going to make some mistakes along the way, but that we don't have the time to play cautious and wait for the market. The one thing that has completely changed with the IRA is this influx of federal cash that's happening all over the world to transform. because on climate, we don't have the time to waste. It's not a wait for the market to sort it out situation. We just don't have that time. So if we want to be in the game and we want to find our spot in the global market, we're going to have to get out there and do it. So we need leadership and investment, and we need to shift from the lucky country to the innovative country. I believe we have everything we need to do that. We've got smart people, we've got smart investors. We have younger people coming up into the sector who really want to work in this and make it part of what will be Australia's next economy. The next election in the US happens in November, and then our own election will probably happen around May. So we have the chance to lock in that no turn back kind of approach on climate. And that makes me excited, but we have to get in there and make sure we do it and communicate with people the enthusiasm and excitement that this offers Australia and the world. And we're up against disinformation in the Murdoch media. We watched what happened with The Voice and the kind of disinformation that was spun around making people feel uncomfortable or worried about something that really shouldn't have worried them. And I just think you watch the kind of antics around nuclear, and I don't believe for 1 second that the coalition thinks nuclear power is ever enough in Australia. To go from a cold start on something that takes 20 to 30 to 40 years to establish makes it irrelevant with just climate change in mind. The cost, I think, you've probably seen the CSR figures, but I've seen others that say it's 8 to 10 to 12 to 15 times more expensive than renewables and battery storage. So it just doesn't make good economic sense. And then there's the risk. Who really wants a nuclear power station in their backyard? And Australians have fought long and hard for a nuclear-free position. Why would you change that when there's so many better options? So these are the things that I see as kind of on our kind of thinking right now and the moment we're in. The opportunities are great. The risks, if we don't take them, are very scary, not just for the environment and the climate, as the second or third largest exporter of fossil fuels, Australia, but also for our economy. So if we want, where will our kids and grandkids be working? It won't be in digging coal out of the ground. It won't be in producing fracked gas or going up to the Northern Territory to open up new gas basins. And we don't want it to be. We want it to be in the solution to climate. If that's on offer, why wouldn't we take it? So that's it for me. And I'd love to open it up to questions, but more importantly, to discussion, to hear what you think and where you think our opportunities collectively are for bringing about the change I think we all know we need to get to. And, what can we as professionals do to kind of help it happen faster?
Blair, that's amazing. Thank you so much for introducing our topic this evening. So many interesting points. I've written down about 6 questions, so I know I won't be able to ask them all. But I just want to kick us off with asking one, and I've seen there's a couple of questions in the chat, so feel free to add your questions in there or jump in with your comments as well. But just while that's kicking off, Blair, you talked about, rather than being the lucky country, being the innovative country, and you also talked about, that we need to look beyond being dig and ship to, looking to value add. Where do you think, are there obvious things that you think Australia, areas where Australia can be, smarter?
You bet. I love, in our forum is an outfit called Supercharge Australia, which looks just at value adding on rare earth minerals and batteries. There are all kinds of great little companies starting up who want to do things like full recycling of batteries. So, one of the things that we would be really good at is coming up with the rare earth minerals, producing the batteries, but doing it in a circular economy approach where you could charge more money by not having a use it and dump it battery, right? Like, we're not going to be the cheap outfit because we have more expensive labor costs and all these things. So why don't we be the A-listing battery country in the world where you buy them from us and you get the whole package? You ship them in and we'll take them back and we'll recycle them here, and then you'll get your next battery through us. But it's going to cost you a little extra. But the beauty of that is you also get the net zero benefit of using those batteries as opposed to a one-off battery kind of thing. So these are areas where when I talk to Kirk McDonald, who runs Supercharge, he tells me about 15, 20 different companies who are all, thinking about these kinds of things, but they're going to need a leg up because unfortunately for Australia, our market is tiny. Unlike America, you've got this massive market. So you can throw stuff out into that market and, the amount of kind of, the sheer size and scale of it mean it's almost hard for you to fail. We have the opposite problem in Australia. We're going to have to look at things like longer offtake contracts where, for instance, India would buy for 3 years of that battery product. And we know, and investors know, we've got contracts with people who are going to buy that thing for 3 years. That's going to make the difference. And investors will go, okay, I'll put in knowing that you've got a market for it. Other stuff that we do really well, besides the kind of green hydrogen potential of green iron ore and steel. Whereas, I mean, in all honesty, if Twiggy Forest figures out how to do green iron ore, we're done. I mean, our economy is set for 100 years. I kid you not. It's not going to be easy, but we shouldn't be shy in helping that along, because if we get it right, there's sort of no other country in the world that can do what we can do in terms of producing it fast enough to meet the demand in China, Korea, Japan, for green iron ore and green steel for manufacturing. At the moment, it's leveled off. It's having issues, but we'll always need iron ore. And if we can charge a premium for green iron ore and steel, the potential is massive. Now, sure, it's got risks if it doesn't work out. But I think we're a pretty clever nation and we can figure this out. And Twiggy Forest and Fortescue have the resources to do it and have already cracked like 3 or 4 different patents around whole supply chain areas of using green hydrogen for various things. So those are a couple. There are lots more, and Supercharge does these kind of little annual award ceremony thing. They've just opened up their categories. So you go onto Supercharge and look at the various little startups that put in, and the one that won last year, and the ones that are going in for this year, and you'll see exactly the kind of stuff that, it is self-selecting. People aren't doing stupid things. They're really looking for things that work in our economy and the things that work with what we've got. So those are the companies I'd recommend. I just mentioned one other thing, a little tangential, but very interesting to me because I work in the finance sector now. And I would say that I have no experience in I've never done a business degree. But when I came out of 350 in the divestment campaign, 10 years of real remarkable success where people were moving huge amounts of money quite quickly because they just thought, I have a choice, I'm going to do that. And I'm not talking about just individuals, I'm talking about big institutions, super funds, etc. What I got constantly asked was, well, then where do I put the money? And then, this is 6-7 years ago, started to look at, well, where would you put it? And end up at F-Invest, that's where you put it. But if you look at the kinds of things that are happening, just give you an example of a project that was done with climate friendly, an outfit called Conscious Capital, and First Nations people using carbon credits to buy back First Nations land for First Nations people. That is just an incredible, complex, but interesting use, multiple benefit of credits, which are not just for trying to cover up where your emissions are, but really using structures like carbon credits to do multi-benefit solution work. And what will happen on that land is First Nations people and others will come in with renewable energy projects, with regenerative agriculture projects. There's interest and there's money now for these kind of things for people to try, and there's a huge appetite for it. Interestingly, there's also a huge appetite for international investors who want that stuff. So Brookfield's an example in Canada, coming in, really wants to buy into this sort of stuff. If you look at Mike Cannon-Brookes' challenge of AGL, fascinating. I think he probably went in thinking, this is going to be easy. I'm going to turn that thing around. And guess what? It wasn't easy, but he's in there still. He's, working with it. He's trying to figure out how to make it work. I'm fascinated to see how it goes. I wish him all the success. It won't be an easy solution, but he's not giving up. And I think smart people will find these challenges and they'll find them really interesting and they'll want to be part of that. So that's where I think innovation's coming in as away from that idea of the lucky country. We just, there's all this stuff, we'll dig it out and we'll sell it and we're good. it's not, the world doesn't work that way anymore. Complexity is the thing of our time. We've got to get smarter about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how we value add so that we make sure we're getting as much out of this as we can for our own economy. And when I say that, Indonesia and African nations are writing into this into contracts with those buying things like rare earth minerals from them. Australia hasn't gotten its shit together yet. We're behind Indonesia and African countries who are saying, we're no longer just going to sell you the raw materials. We're not going to do it. Doesn't make any sense for us. There are no jobs in that long term. There's no investment opportunities, no ownership opportunities. So we got to get our heads around this. We're not asking people for favors. These are our resources. We get to decide how we sell them. So we got to get more clever about how we do that. And I think there are a lot of people thinking about it. So, fingers crossed, but I think it's going to need push because the government is less ambitious than we would like it to be. So we're going to have to hold their feet to the fire to say, we're asking you for policies that help us do it better.
Absolutely, Leah. I'm going to let you know that there's 3 really interesting questions in the chat, and I do know you also want to ask our opinions as well. But the first one from David is if you've got any thoughts about Matt Keane's new role.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Do you want to answer them one at a time?
Well, yeah, can do. And I won't take so much time for each one. That one was important, I think, and not enough people thinking about how do we, what's our space in this? How do we choose the things that are going to be best for us? It's probably the most complex thing for Australia to do and for our government to kind of think about. And I would say hand on heart, I've got a lot of time for Chris Bowen, who I think is deeply embedded in what the solutions are and does understand it. I went to his press club talk about a month ago, and his level of detail into this stuff is impressive. And Matt Keane is coming in, could be that czar kind of person I was talking about. He is bipartisan. He totally gets it. I've known him for many years. Lovely guy, smart guy, is also a great negotiator. So whether he will stand any hope of working federally with the coalition, I don't hold out a lot of hope, but I think he can talk to a lot of more conservative investors and companies. And that it was a stroke of genius to put him in that role, because he is not one party or another. He is strictly about climate solutions. And he's a business person, and he has thought long and hard about what can work from a kind of across the board, remove the politics, what would it look like? And I have a lot of hope in his appointment, because I think he kind of strips out the climate wars a bit. He's successfully worked it in New South Wales across the Liberal Party, and I think he can help do that federally. So yeah, I have a lot of optimism about that, and we should all keep in touch with him, and he's open to that. I'm hoping he's going to do the fundraiser for Climate Action Week, and you should all come to that event. I kid you not, please come, and I'll send an invite when I think the date is October 17 in Sydney. We should all turn up, and then you can ask him yourself, what are you going to do about it, Matt? And Climate Action Week's a great sort of platform for him. Let's mention Australia going for COP31. Nothing could back us in more to having to actually do real stuff and the whole world watching than hosting the COP. And he'd be in a position, in a real position of power to kind of play an influential role. So I think we should all be pretty excited about that. I'm looking down the list of climate directories, 690 climate action companies. I would love to see that list. Thank you, Tim. In fact, I'm giving a talk at the Australian Museum, and I'm trying to look for the good news stories. So thank you. I'll have a look at that. The one thing when I went looking was I said 3 things about the difference between the decarbonized economy and the previous economy. So say fossil fuels, but other things. Say economy of 20 years ago, 3 major differences. It's collaborative, not competitive, because it's lateral. So it's whole supply chain, smaller companies versus top down. But that's really exciting, because both there are more opportunities to be involved in for ownership, and for employment, but it's also that collaboration is required not just within the whole solutions piece, but globally. It offers quite a different structure of how we potentially solve this problem, but still create an economy where people are actively involved potentially in the solutions piece, owning it, working for it, investing in it, whatever that looks like. And the third thing I would say is younger people kind of get this and they're excited about it. They don't see it as a threat. One thing I come across all the time when I talk to boards or companies where, and please forgive me, this is going to sound highly offensive, but we have a real problem in the world with older white men on boards over a certain age who simply cannot understand that this is what it takes to solve this problem, and it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Changing in this way to a kind of a very different way about thinking about energy, about collaboration, about what solutions work country to country, should be thought of as a nice thing and an opportunity thing, not a, it can't be that way because we don't control it. So we're going to have a challenge changing that thinking, I think, and getting people excited. But I have hope that younger people will come in, start taking positions on boards and bring that kind of collaborative thinking in. And I look forward to seeing how that changes the way the world does things. You know, we're still looking down a history of colonization that could be changed just through this difference. If you need rare earth minerals from the Democratic Republic of Congo, what if instead of going in and taking them, we have partnerships that allow them to own the mines and the jobs and the processing, and we buy for them as if they are equals to us? Is that such a radical idea? I think it's a great idea. And wouldn't it be a nicer world to live in when we think we're helping people be part of a sustainable economy? Call me crazy optimistic, but I kind of think
100%.
the speed of this change has to happen with everyone involved, and the potential for us using that to change the way we do things, I think is quite good. Okay, sorry, moving down. Given that sometimes the motive,
asking about carbon credits.
Yes. Here's my only, I can answer that quickly. Most of them are crap. Most of them are trying to offset bad stuff. You know, like I'm an oil company and I just want to look good while I'm continuing to trash the planet. However, where they're really working is that example of the climate friendly conscious capital project, where people are structurally using carbon credits for multiple benefits. So in this case, First Nations land buying, First Nations employment on their own land, making people getting what I would call patient returns on that investment. That's not going to make you $1 squillion overnight, right? That's going to maybe give you a little bit of a slow, steady profit over time, but you're going to feel really proud about helping use your capital to structure something in such a way that you're addressing all kinds of problems like bad land use and, you know, the need for renewable energy on country or better water use. And so I'm hearing about more. I just heard today that Conscious Capital is on a second project like that. I've heard about another company totally different doing the same kind of thing. And Palladium Investments also looking at a really interesting structural First Nations kind of. So that's where carbon credits, I think, are really doing good stuff, is when people are saying, hey, you know, we could take that money that might be used as a greenwash, and instead of that, we can use it in a way to really address kind of, you know, big problems. So multiple problems with solutions. So I wouldn't write it off entirely. They're not all bad. Some are being used in really creative ways. Back to the innovation piece, right? You get creative people who want to do good, thinking about, hey, how could I use that tool to do good stuff? And I'm just seeing more and more examples of people kind of jumping in and trying to do that. So that's pretty impressive. And not just in Australia, all over the world. Tim, looking at yours, recent net zero steel 2030 challenge. Yeah, that's exciting, huh? And also I'm finding stuff in there that's like little tiny solutions that somebody's just going to take away and build a whole business around it. So that's the kind of interesting thing about, you give people a challenge and they do all kinds of really creative stuff. But it's not going to be giant, make $1 million overnight stuff. It's going to be let's all get involved in investing in stuff that might take 10, 15, 25 years. But at the other end of it, we're going to end up with a big solution and some really good opportunities for our economy, our investment, all kinds of stuff. Thank you, Martin. That's very kind. How do we shift? Super. Oh, one of my favorite topics. Can I give you a great news story about super? I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this, but now that I've said it, I can't back down. A company that shall remain nameless in the super space hired you should remain nameless in the lobbying space for like 25K to go in and say, can you just fix this super thing? Because the challenge is about reporting. So we've got like 40, 50-year-old reporting laws around what superannuation has to do to, tick all the boxes to be credible. And they're very outdated. And one of them's like, you got to have, I can't remember what the years, it's like 40 years of showing a progression of profit. It's way too many years. And it's very kind of slow economy thinking of the past. And as I understand it, this person went in and rewrote for them, went in and talked to everyone, and they collectively wrote, well, all you'd have to do is put in this kind of reporting around, including things like ESG, which is an alternative to showing just dollar profit. You're showing sustainable profit over time. And the treasurer, as I gather it, said, yeah, all right, we can do that. So the next time this comes up for a vote, which should be the next sitting week or month, we should see a change in if you hear stories about a shift, as in riding in some other legislation in how superannuation reports, this will be a good news story, because it will have avoided turning it into a big giant national crisis and just updated the reporting. No one's saying that people of super funds don't have to be, held accountable to what they deliver. But literally the reporting we have right now means most of them have to go offshore to prove the kind of profits required in order to be considered a going concern. And that's just not true. Surely we should be able to invest in Australia, and we should be able to, invest, take some risk. Say it's 20% of your whole portfolio. Shouldn't you be able to take that and put it into kind of Australian decarbonizing companies? Sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't, but it's really a good use of our own money to invest back into Australia. So watch that space. I'm watching, we are the biggest concentrated amount of retirement money in the world is Australia, if you can imagine that. It's a huge amount of money. So if you unleashed of the 28 billion that Martin has listed there, 2% of that in Australian investment, it would fundamentally change our economy. And we would move to that innovative economy away from the dig and ship, because you can invest in all kinds of stuff that Australians are doing. So watch that space. Hopefully there'll be good news on that front within a month, 2 months, if all goes well. Also, one area we need to be consultation strategy for renewal rollout. Yeah, absolutely. This is tricky. Transparency around this stuff when you've been in the climate wars is really tough. But yes, we need to be looking at the multiple benefit lens and proper community consultation. Because we didn't have a good history of that, it's a bit chaotic, but I think we'll get there. And there are some good people doing good work in the community consultation space around big project renewables. And in the forum are 3 amazing women who've worked in Scandinavian and European big offshore wind on land, and what they bring back, their biggest suggestion, all 3 of them, is offer 20% ownership to the community, and you get right past the whole consultation problem, because you're an owner. So you get to say, we don't like where you're putting that. Why don't you put that in a different place? And as a potential owner of the project, you get heard. So it's worked a charm in Europe, where 20% is often standard on offer to communities if you want that, if the government's going to let you attempt to build that project. They may not take it up, but you've made the offer, and you might find communities like Hepburn Wind of long ago really want to be involved in owning a part of that project, and super funds might want to be part of that project. But when those communities are owners, they are at the table from the start. And it's a real way to get around lack of consultation or understanding what communities do and don't want. So again, lots of good people thinking about that, but more work needed, and the government needs to get its head around it, I think, a bit better. Noni, I do have fossil fuel industry has pressured. Yeah, they're still okay in gas and coal projects. I guess that's our, when they announce we're going to have gas forever, they're still under the thumb of the fossil fuel sector. And I'm sympathetic. It's a massive change, right? You're saying you're going to dump the thing that has basically, well, it really has not provided the economy of Australia, but it certainly sells itself as, we have to export gas and it's the only thing keeping our economy afloat, which is utter bullshit, by the way. But we bought into that for so long. It's really hard to get people to change their thinking. So I think as professionals, one of our jobs is to talk a lot to our networks about what's coming and how Australia can be a part of it. And, ask the question, well, what will our kids and grandkids be doing in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? It's not going to be digging stuff out of the ground. The world is moving quickly on from that. Rare earth minerals will be an important part of that, but it's not going to be gas and coal expansion. We're going to change from that very quickly, thanks to post-Paris. That pressure is still there. I don't know if I said this already. Stop me. 400 lobbyists, fossil fuel lobbyists, are still in Canberra every day, walking the halls. The number of people I know who do lobbying for our side, I know one guy. I know one human being in Canberra who's in there talking to politicians about what the decarbonizing sector needs for 3 specific companies. So the reason I set up the forum was to have a constant rotating number of these people in there talking to politicians, because they don't have the time or the money to hire a lobbyist. What could we do? I don't know. We could all pitch in $5,000 each and hire a full-time lobbyist just to sit there and get in their way, just to say, hello, we're still here. We want other things. The pressure is big, and it's probably our biggest challenge is kind of, dislodging that from its position of power. One little bit of hope is Gina Reinhardt getting excited about rare earth minerals. You know what I mean? When you get Gina to change from it's got to be coal, oil, and gas to there's money to be made elsewhere. There's something to be said for that. She's not my favorite person, but if you can shift those rusted on, mining companies to see the potential, that's real. Okay, questions. No needs. How do we shift state governments? State governments are really fantastically better than the federal government. You'll be interested to know they're actually competing with each other on every front, on renewable energy hubs, green hydrogen hubs, net zero, this, that, and the other, different projects. They're all in there fighting with each other. So I have more hope in the states than I do in the federal, in the sense of kind of they've already turned and they get it. It's still tricky for them at election time, and they're not communicating leadership either. So that's their biggest challenge, is the kind of hunter doesn't know how much opportunity is in this space. Queensland is kicking ass. Excuse the French. You cannot believe how many things Queensland did. You wouldn't think it, but they totally get the potential for their economy in this space and are playing all sides. WA, a little trickier. It's like going back to the 1940s. Northern Territory, I don't know enough, but yeah, they've kind of sold their soul to the gas devil. Victoria, New South Wales, South Australia, Queensland, they totally get it, and they're really competing with each other to do more. Climate Action Week, thank you for posting that. And when the fundraiser happens, I'd like to see you all there in person and share a glass of wine with you. And Matt Keane will be there. He's our keynote speaker. So come ask Matt yourself, what do you do with that big job, Matt, that you just got? Thoughts about emerging corporate and state response to climate litigation. Whoa, it's a big topic. I could take you off on a whole, I just did a couple kind of discrete briefings with the various legal groups fighting fossil fuels. The tactics are ugly. This is something we all have to start paying attention to. Santos hired the nastiest law firm in the world, and it got really personal. Like, they went after the people, the lawyers themselves, the kind of Trumpian tactics you see about discrediting individuals who are just trying to do public interest litigation. We're going to have to do a lot more on that front. That's not the reason for this briefing, but if you'd like to know more, please ask me. I'm happy to put you in touch with some people. Elaine Johnson, who stepped out of the EDO, is working on the whole linking Australia into the kind of global effort of how we will have to push back against big corporate money paying huge amounts for really nasty kind of legal tactics. And in this case, I won't go into detail, but in the Santos case in the Tiwi Islands, they had the most expensive lawyer. They owned the Murdoch media, and they paid local people to sit in court. They had no idea what they were doing there. They literally just take cash in and start handing it out. Would you go sit in the courtroom, to make it look as if locals are for the project? So the tactics are ugly, and they're going to get uglier because fossil fuels has its back against the wall. But if we care about the transition, we're going to have to support public interest litigation to try and play the role that it should play in stopping the big projects that shouldn't go ahead, for environmental reasons, for community reasons, for cultural reasons, and for climate reasons. So watch that space.
I'm just going to draw your attention to the last question down the bottom.
Sure.
And back to Steve. And so this one's from David, just asking about biodiversity and are we on the cusp of solving biodiversity crisis?
I'd encourage you, if I could recommend a couple of people to do a session for you on the biodiversity climate combo. It's definitely not my area of expertise. The Sydney's hosting this Nature Positive conference in October. I just got an invite. I have no idea what's going to happen. It's very last minute organized, but I'm fascinated to see who turns up. It's a global thing. It's another like COP. It's kind of interesting that we're hosting it because it kind of forces us to get our act together to do more, say more. But I would recommend a couple of people who could come in and talk to you about some of the work and projects going on. I think Australia really lags behind the putting together of Nature Positive and climate. And in fact, let's face it, the UN has done a terrible job of separating these two things out when they should have been together. But the world is getting a little better at it. Australia's kind of got some catch up to do on that space. Thanks for that, Tim. Definitely watch that. It's DECU, the Department of Climate Change, has put it together, and it gives us a chance to explore more in this kind of area. Definitely worried about the biodiversity crisis. There's no doubt about it. It's terrifying. So we might as well roll our sleeves up and recognize that we're going to have to do both things at the same time: biodiversity protection and kind of policy around that, plus climate together. And often they are siloed. So we really need better experts at knitting together how the two things can work together well. It's not my super area of expertise, but I talk to a lot of people who do work in the space, and there's things like Regen Labs based out of Sydney doing some great work. A friend of mine, Elizabeth Neely, came out of the World Bank and is now working on an Australian biodiversity protection kind of how to cost supporting it. So how do you come up with, like that kind of good benefit credit thing? How can you do that for biodiversity? And there are some good people in the thinking space around that. So if you don't mind, I'll send in some names. And
yeah, that would be that'd be great, Blair. If you've got those, we'll definitely follow up. See if they come and chat.
I think it's a whole topic, and you might want somebody to kind of lay the groundwork for the
we've done a few of those over the years as well, which is
good.
I might just ask a couple of questions here, just taking you back to the US. I mean, you've talked about how pivotal this next election is. Do you want to, what do you think we should expect in the run up to the election? Do you think climate will feature much? Where is it all fitting within that?
Yeah, I'd say it won't be loud and proud, but it'll be there. And everyone with a brain knows what happens if Trump gets elected, and everyone with a brain knows what happens if Kamala Waltz get elected, because Kamala's history and track record on climate is way better than Biden's. So as a litigator and coming from California, probably the most, if you think of California as a country, one of the most progressive countries on climate in the world. In their ability, and all the stuff that I've talked about earlier about the innovation nation. California has that down. Danny Kennedy, who's an Australian who went and started a company and using satellites to do kind of judge how you install renewables into things like apartment blocks and shopping centers, and so it made it really cost effective, has been on something called what's it called? It's a California incubator lab just on climate solutions. The state puts billions of dollars into incubating and research for California and other companies. And Australian Danny, has been on their board for the last 5 or 8 years, started something called New Energy Nexus based on that kind of same model and taking it global. So if you think of Kamala as someone who lived in an economy where climate thinking was happening 30 years ago, it should give us some hope. And at the risk of maybe getting into all kinds of trouble, I think they're a shoo-in. I think the world has moved on, and the vast majority of Australians want a positive next leadership, and they want people who are younger and in tune with what's going on in the world. I think they've already won. If I gave you 2 examples of why, it's when the most popular young person band singer posted the Bratz. Kamala Harris is a Brat meme. But 5 minutes after she got announced, the entire young population of America said, "That's it. She's got my vote." It's pretty remarkable, for a country that has optional voting. Suddenly, young people were in, and she's done nothing but reinforce that she is someone who could represent a younger voice in the politics of America. And the second thing was, before he got selected as the vice presidential candidate, the weird thing just stuck, right? Walz's ability to, in a very plain speaking way, to point to Vance and Trump and just say they're weird. And their politics are weird and their thinking is weird. It's stuck with Americans, and most people are not going to want to be seen with or attached to or voting for weird. So these 2 things very quickly had a cut through that many other things have not had. And it's just become positive versus dark and evil very quickly. We'll see it play out at the convention this week ahead. And already she's polling ahead of Trump. And it's a short window of time. It's not like she's got to keep it holding for 2 years. She's got 70 days to hold the feeling of excitement and enthusiasm for moving forward, and a progressive government that is staying in the world and not pulling out. And quite frankly, even in America, it's been couched as fascist or not fascist. And that too has really stuck and struck a chord with Americans. I think they've had enough of the nastiness, the Fox News nastiness, and certainly young people have, that I know in the States, and when I talk to people who work in organizations. So I'm optimistic. I think America is going to elect a first Black woman and a plain speaking Midwestern up next, because they represent who America is right now. And that will lock in the IRA and the no turning back on climate action. And then our election follows in May. So at that point, it would be hard to elect a government that isn't, part of the global move to where this is going economically.
Do you want to just talk a little bit, Blair, also about the Teals? Because I know, I know you've been quite involved, and a lot of our group have had involvement with them as well. Because they've led the way, haven't they, on some of this globally?
Yeah. Completely. In a funny way, I would say many other countries, but we elected our 7 new independents, already some great ones in there. And then if you look at the kind of follow-on, France's winning of the "we must take out fascism," where the left came together, even though they're very disparate, to defeat the far right. And then the UK election, and now the US election. The Teals have been an inspiration globally, because many were watching what happened, how it happened, the role that communities played in just saying, we've had enough of not being represented. We're not being heard. Our interests are not being taken into account and not into government. And I think that's still there. And the next election could see more elected, and I hope that that's the case. And I'd be all for a world where a party doesn't own the government, and negotiation has to happen between community independents elected with their community's interest in mind, and they have to negotiate every piece of legislation to get it across. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think the two-party system is broken. It's captured, and we need a new model. And we've kind of seen a way forward, which might be, and I'd say term limits are another thing that could really help this, where, you know, if you can't be captured if you're, if you can't hold power for more than one term. And that idea of civic duty and things like citizens' juries, where you're making decisions with the involvement of community, instead of saying you vote once every 4 years, 2 years, whatever it is, and that's it, your job done. Let's gotta stop. I mean, the complexity of the issues that we're looking at now, we need everyone to stay actively involved. So we're gonna have to look for ways to keep them actively involved. I think community independence really offer the chance for people to be actively, and even the voices groups, even if you don't have a community independent, there's kitchen table conversations. The Kathy McGowan approach showed us that communities can be better activated and stay involved, and that should be exciting and something we all want to encourage. So I'm all for more of it, not less, and more ways to get young people actively involved. I thank every day. I thank Australia for having mandatory voting, and I'd say if I could change one thing in America, it would be that I'd change a voluntary voting system to a mandatory, because you could transform the country overnight. The only people voting are people who have vested interests and are controlling. And you know, we've seen in the states where if you're an African American attempting to vote, you will face 14 challenges on the way to the polls. People will challenge your registration, how you register, the number of polls you have to go to. I mean, Republicans are putting every single thing in the way of diversifying the voter pool. It's just straight out anti-democratic. So mandatory voting, let's never let that go, Australia. It's really important.
Final question for you, then I'm going to flip back to Carolyn. So just going back to our title, so will we or won't we solve climate? Where do you land on that one?
It's up to us. I really think we will all have to get involved if we're going to tip it the right way. And Future Made in Australia Act, like it's not, the hand on heart, it's not perfect, but it's something, and we're going to have it, and it's written and it's ready, and you can take it off the shelf and kick it into play. So I say let's do that first, and then we're tipping the scale even more in our favor of potentially getting there. I'm optimistic. I think people do see that this is, and you know, not to sound again overly pie in the sky, but if we solve climate change, what can we not solve? There is nothing as big and nothing as internationally challenging, where you've got every country has a role to play, and some countries have not been involved ever, you know, never had an opportunity to play a role. So I would say, let's do this thing, and then let's take on the next thing with optimism, because we'll have proven that we have the smarts and the ability to work on finding solutions to really difficult problems by cooperating, and we all benefit from that. So here's to that, and staying in the game. Don't give up. I think we can do it.
Thank you, Blair. I'm just really conscious that you wanted to ask us some questions, and we haven't really given you that space. So maybe we do finish at 9:15, but maybe if you've got a question, and then everyone on the call can just toss their answers into the chat, and you can get a feel for people's thoughts. So what is it? Have you got one or two questions that you'd love to ask us?
I just too want to say, Tim, I'm so glad that you mentioned Nat Bullard's stats. If you know, and Renew Economy is the other one. Like, you know, if you're interested, just glance at Renew Economy every couple of days, and you can't help but get excited about how fast things are already moving and how many opportunities we have. So I guess I'd ask the group, is there anything that, like, the Climate Capital Forum goes to Canberra all the time. Would any of you want to come along and meet? Because we can set these visits up where we rotate around, we go sit down. I have to tell you that even when we're seeing people that are not directly involved in the issue, I learn stuff every single time I go to Canberra. And I don't think enough Australians go down there and get in the face of politicians to say, and ask hard questions. What are you doing for us? What are you doing? So if people would be interested, let me know, because the forum kind of tries to organize every 3 or 4 months to go down and do 3-4 days. So let me know, and maybe Carolyn, you could
There's
send
lots
me.
of yeses already on the chat, and there's about 6 or 7. I'm a yes, so count me in.
Why not just do one for professionals for climate?
Yeah.
We just organize a professional trip down. Everybody usually just pays their own way.
Amazing.
We have a nice dinner the night between, and we all, have a social chance to talk over how it went, and you share. Every now and then you'll hit a total asshole, and it's always fun to go, oh my God, can you believe it? But most of the time,
I think
I'm totally surprised.
I think that sounds amazing. I think we'll have, I don't know, is there an upper limit of people that we can include, Blair? Okay, then.
It really is in the organizing of the thing to make it kind of tight, so that you go in the morning and you just have the meetings back to back, and usually, and you do a little training up. There's not a lot needed, but you want to kind of walk you through what to expect, and what do you do if somebody kind of just doesn't want to hear it, and kind of thing. It's like lobby training, but you'll get only 15 minutes or 20 minutes, so you got to really be pointed about bringing your points in. What are your big points that you want to make? But it's really fun and really interesting, and I kind of feel like every Australian should do it, because
I think that would be amazing to have a group.
Too much like no touch point with this whole thing that is our government, and they work for us, right? They should be accountable to us, and we should be asking them tough questions. That question about how much are they captured, and and how much pressure is being put on. Let's go down and say, why do you keep authorizing new coal and gas? We want to know your answer to that question.
That sounds really good. I think that's a definite yes from a whole, probably about at least 10 people already. And what we might do is put a note out to everyone. Anyone who's interested, we'll set up a separate session and maybe ask one or two of you to
lead training,
and we'll set up a program or the process that we need to follow, and that'll be amazing.
I usually just book a hotel. I book it for at least 2 days, sometimes 3. And the other thing we can explore some other things, but like you could do a briefing for the teals, for instance, and you'll get the independents in a room, and you'll just get to ask them questions. And so an example, like on the Future Maintenance Tract, and I'm not trying to bad note anyone, but we went to see one of the teals, and we got a lot of like conservative economic thinking, very old school, like, no, we're not going to put any federal money, so we'll wait for the market to decide kind of thing. Is no one in the world is doing that, right? So if we're going to get Future Made in Australia across the line, we're all going to have to pick up the phone and ring our members and say, I want this. I know it's not perfect, but I want us to kickstart an effort to be in this game. And so that can be your first assignment. And then the next thing is, and by the way, I'm coming down to see you. I'm really going to make an effort to come down and meet you, because I don't think you're hearing enough from people like us, who care about this issue. So yes, there is the Better Futures Forum. We could try it a little bit around. Are people going down for that? Anyone going down for the Better Future Forum in September? We could do it on one side of that, or we could, and it always has to obviously happen during a sitting time. But yeah, we can plan it. So, and also it's okay, we can do it twice. So if you can't make the first date, no worries. We can do another one 6 months down the track and have 2 separate, groups of people go.
Thank you. That is absolutely amazing. What a high to finish on tonight, Blair. Thank you so much.
Really good fun. I look forward to doing it.
Hour-packed hour and a quarter. I feel very excited having heard your presentation, and I know there's so many others on the call who share that sentiment. So we feel so very lucky to have had you and to have heard about your many years of work and effort, and we all really wish you the very best going forward.
Thank you. And yeah, let's go down, hang out in Canberra together. It'd be good fun.
Let's hang out. Next month, just letting everyone know, we've got Tina Jackson speaking. Tina's the co-founder and executive director of the Community Independence Project, and they're doing great work in developing a pipeline of independents to get into federal parliament. And also just to mention quickly that we recently sent a questionnaire around to the group, and we just wanted to say a big thank you because we've had a fantastic response with lots of really helpful feedback. And we'll be looking at it over the coming month or two, and then we'll report back on some of the suggestions of what's working well and how we can build further with the group. So thank you again. Keep spreading the word about our group, and in your networks and communities, everyone is welcome. And enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Blair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
See ya.
Thank you.